to go ahead and apologize in advance. I didn't script this video, so it's just me talking randomly about some favorite D&D puzzles, but I hope you enjoy nonetheless. In Dungeons & Dragons, when you make a puzzle, sometimes it can go horribly, it can go exactly how you planned, and sometimes you get the best result when players do something you didn't even expect or even think was possible that solves the puzzle. So I made a list of some of my favorite Dungeons & Dragons puzzles / trap rooms and stuff that I made for my current campaign, and I just wanted to talk about those today. These aren't in any particular order either, I should specify that. Well, they're in order of appearance. I would number them by, like, top 10 favorite puzzle things, but I'm honestly, like, I know which one is my first, which one I like the most, but other than that, I have no idea what order these would go in. So these are just in order of appearance. You know what? I'm just going to have it right here. So how it works is the players have these rings, and there's a cannon on the wall, and all you need to do, and there's a ball and chain for the cannon. All you got to do, put the ring on one of the walls. The ring then just sort of seals itself in and makes a hole through the wall. And then you just got to load the cannon, and once you have rings that go through all the walls, and on the other side of the room, there's a hole for the ball and chain. So it's really just load ball and chain into cannon, put ring on wall, make a bunch of holes so that when the cannon fires, it'll just go through all the holes into the last hole in the wall, and that'll open the door on the other side. It's pretty simple. It's one of the puzzles in the beginning of the campaign, so I didn't want to do anything too difficult. The reason that I wanted to talk about it is because it's one of those moments of players thinking of things that you wouldn't have thought of. So my players walk into the room. First is the fighter in the party, and they sort of walk up and see this ball and chain, and something interesting about my fighter was that they were an enslaved circus performer. They actually see this ball and chain laying on the ground ready to be loaded into this cannon, and they freak out. They're like, "Oh God, no, not again!" So they just like have horrible flashbacks of when they were trapped in the circus and stuff. So they just start wailing on the chain, just like, "Die, chain, die!" And I'm like, how much health does it? What? Okay. So I just look it up. Chains have like maybe 5 AC, 10 health, or vice versa, something. It's not hard to hit. It's not hard to break either. So I'm just like, okay, you wail on it for a minute and it breaks, and you have now this thing. And I'm like, okay, whatever, that's fine. They can still load it into the cannon and do the holes and shoot the thing. It just won't be attached to a chain. Whatever. So then my fighter's like, I'm gonna keep it. I'm like, what? No, yeah, I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna use it as a weapon. And I'm like, okay, no, that's fine. So my druid walks into the room, sort of sees that it's a winding hallway, gets one of those rings and puts it on the wall, and then realizes, oh, this is gonna like make a whole thing, and there's a thing, but the thing's broken. Then they're like, I'm gonna go deeper into this room and inspect stuff. So the druid makes their way to the other side after this winding hallway and sees that there's a hole on the other side that just doesn't, it just goes in the wall. So they're like, oh my God, I figured it out. So they run back to the fighter and they're like, hey, can you give me your ball and chain really quick? And they're like, sure, yeah, here you go. So Druid runs back over to the hole and just chucks the ball and chain in the thing, doesn't even use the cannon. So I'm just sitting here like, I can't think of any way that wouldn't work that way. So the door swings open. So I've run 2 campaigns so far, and in my first one that I never even finished, I put it in, and in this one I was like, I gotta put it in again. Basically what it is a bunch of slabs in a room, and then in one of the walls is a cannon, but it's not a regular cannon. The slabs actually reflect sound, so the cannon fires on them, and it'll basically just hit one, and then bounce off another, and then bounce off another, and they eventually have to get it to hit a certain wall after bouncing through all the slabs, and then that wall just shatters, and they can continue on. So then they do that, and they bounce off the things, and they figure it out pretty quickly. The fighter is the only one that can actually move the slabs because they're a Goliath and they're huge and they're really strong. So they just get around and like turn them and get all of them to face the right way. So they move the slabs around, and then they break the wall. They get they continue on in the dungeon. But then my fighter is like, oh wait, hold on, I can turn the slabs and break other walls. Maybe there's like a secret room or something. And at this point, I started kicking myself because I was like, I should have done that, and I didn't do that. He basically turned the very last slab in the opposite direction so that it, instead of hitting the wall that continues into the dungeon, it hit the opposite wall. And I could have put something there, but didn't think about it. And then he did it, and I was just like, I have nothing ready. And that's a lesson in DMing for you. Always be ready to pull something out of your ass, because I think it's when I realized very quickly that I really enjoy those out of the box thinking moments when the players do that. And I really want to reward that, but at the time I was just like, I don't have anything prepared. I don't know what I could do. I've gotten a little better at it, but it's still something you always got to be aware of. So next puzzle is just it's just an invisible maze, and that was pretty much it. It was an invisible maze, and I was just like, oh, you can't see the walls, so you have to make your way through without having. You can't see anything, but you see. I mean, you see the door, but you don't know how to get there. However, this. I made the maze, and I was just like, okay, there, done. Maze is good. And then we had our first session. This maze is at the end of the first section of the campaign. We had our first session, and my players are breezing through everything, and I'm just like, this maze is not going to be challenging or fun for them, so I need to figure out a way that this becomes better, or harder. I need to figure out a way for this to become more challenging, basically. So up in the corner, I put a tiny little turret on a wooden platform that's manned by an undead goblin, and the goblin has this turret. It's basically a tiny ballista that shoots kind of like maybe, I want to say maybe like foot-long ballistas that are like, they're goblin-sized ballista bolts. So they're like firing at the players just from this corner. They're just peppering them. But then I'm like, oh yeah, no, the walls. How do the walls work? Because the walls are there, but they're invisible. So I'm like, well, okay, the ballista will be magical, and the ballista bolts will be able to travel through the walls, so they'll still be able to fire at the players. So they're trying to get through this maze while this undead goblin is just up here being like, just firing ballista bolts at them while they're trying to make it through here. So I'm like, yeah, that'll work. Perfect. Awesome. So my players get in there. They quickly realize the walls go up to the ceiling and they're invisible. So they're like, fuck, how are we going to get through here? And then the ballistas start coming and they're like, oh god, we're getting shot at. The more they get shot at by these ballistas, the faster they realize that the bolts can actually travel through the invisible walls. The bolts are still in the ground, so my druid is like, hey, can I just pick up one of these bolts and shake it around and find invisible walls? Because whenever a bolt hits an invisible wall, it sort of like ripples. It'll be like, pew, and then the wall will be like. So my druid's running around like a crazy person, swinging this bolt everywhere in the air, just finding invisible walls. And I'm like, okay, you find them, and you know which paths go where and what's a dead end and stuff by waving this thing around. So they see the wooden platform that the undead goblin is on top of, shooting ballistas down at them. They pretty much figured out the path to get there, and then they lead my monk there, so they're like, hey, this is the way you need to take. So the monk, being fast as fuck, is like runs all the way to the corner where the thing is set up, climbs up the rope that's attached to the ceiling, not attached to the wooden platform, because then somebody could just be like, and then pull the guy down. But he runs up to the rope, gets literally on, like, right next to the goblin with his movement, because he double moved and he just ran the whole way. And now he's, like, staring this goblin in the face. And the goblin's just sort of hanging off the edge of the platform, trying to shoot this monk who can't seem to hit. So they knock the goblin down. They pretty much killed him on the way down. He died. He's an undead goblin. He didn't have much hit points to begin with. He was basically just there to man the ballista. So they fuck his shit up. Some of these I got inspiration from online, so I can't take full credit for these. So if you're ever stumped when you're making puzzles, just don't be afraid to look it up, and maybe you'll get some ideas like I did. So this next room I'm really excited for everybody to get to, because it's basically a magnet room that I came up with online, and then I added a few things to it. So what I do is I roll a d6, and whatever roll I have, that's where the players are going to go who have metal on them. The magnets are going to pull them to one of the walls or the ceiling or whatever. So I roll the d6, and they just go flying if they have metal. There's also a sword in the middle, and the sword, whenever it hits one of the walls, is going to multiply. So it'll multiply to 2, then 4, then 8, then 16, then 32, etc., 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 etc. And eventually the room's going to get filled with swords and everything's going to be horrible for them. However, the original sword is covered in blood. It has killed many, many, many people, and any blood that gets on any of the other swords gets once the room has killed everybody, the swords just sort of form back together into the original sword, and any blood that was on any of them goes into that one and stays on that one. So this sword is basically just red at this point. So my players get in and they see this red sword stuck in this thing, and they're like, "That's weird. Whatever." So the door seals behind them. And this is where chaos ensues. The fighter starts getting pulled to wherever. Meanwhile, the sword is multiplying. The sword goes to like 2, then 4, and then blah, 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 and everything. So it gets to 16 swords, and the fighter's like, fuck this. And he ties a rope around 8 of the swords, and he pulls them back so they don't hit the other wall. So then the other 8 swords that he didn't get to tie hit the wall. Those become 16 swords, and he's got 8 swords like held there. So they've got this red sword in this group of 8 swords. So all they need to do is put this red sword back in the thing, and the trap just stops. So they've got this red sword, and they're trying to not let it go. The fighter hands it off to the druid, and then the fighter gets like pulled away. Something couldn't make his strength check. So druid's sitting there, and the druid's like, "Oh god!" So the druid like forcibly tries to like get the sword. Like the sword's stuck on the floor, and the druid's like, "Argh! Druid can't do anything. Druid has no strength. So fighter gets pulled over again and like stops himself, gets the sword, pulls it up like as the magnets are like pulling it in other directions, and then plops it into the thing. It's just like there. And at this point the room shuts off. Everything's good. The trap's cleared. Everybody's fine. All the swords disappear. That one's just there. Red sword back in the thing. Everything's good. And then the fighter's like, this is not happening to anybody else. So then he grabs the rope that he had the other swords tied in and just tries to run around the fucking red sword, and is just like, fuck you! You don't get to trap anybody else, kill them and stuff. So ties the rope around the sword. Then the monk actually comes into that room later, and he's a little bit behind them, and he just sees all these scratch marks on the wall and this red sword that's in a stone thing with a rope tied around it, attaching it to the stone thing. This next room's kind of an odd one, because I was just thinking of what's a weird random thing I could do. So I was like, how about a room where it's a bunch of mirrors, but every time you walk through them, your sex changes. So any character that is a man walks through one, becomes a woman. Any character that's a woman walks through them and becomes a man. But the players need to be their original sex to get through the door at the end, and there's just enough mirrors in the room so that they can make a path through it and get to the door and be able to open it. Otherwise, they can't open it. And then at the end of the room, when they open the door, there's a cannon on the other side of the door, and when the cannon fires, it's going to go into the room. What they may or may not realize is the room is actually coated in magic, so when the cannon fires, the cannonball is going to bounce off of the walls and break all the mirrors. But that's not all. Every mirror has a chance to be containing a specter that's been trapped inside of there. Every time one of them broke, I would roll percentile. So when that cannon goes off, I'm going to have to roll percentile at least like 30 times. So the players get into the room, and they're greeted immediately by a mirror, and they have no real clue what to do. I believe the druid walks through it, and the druid is a female. The druid becomes a male. Then the fighter says, "What happened? Are you okay?" We're trying to reach the druid. The druid then replies back to the fighter. However, the druid's voice is changed now because their sex changed. So the fighter hears this random male's voice that they've never heard before and is like, "No, they must be in danger!" So they run through. Something about my fighter, they don't like men. The fighter is a female Goliath who hates men, probably from the enslavement in the circus days and people being all like, "Yeah, you're fake and stuff," and the ringmaster being a dickwad. So she hates men. She walks through the mirror, turns into a man, looks at herself, and then just vomits right there on the floor. Just bleh. And she can't stand the sight of herself, so she walks back out and turns back to normal. Meanwhile, the druid's going deeper into all these mirrors, changing sexes and stuff, and just constantly going back and forth. So does the monk. So at this point, the fighter's just like, I'm going to close my eyes, I'm going to walk through the mirror. And I'm like, okay, you close your eyes, you walk through the mirror, you feel different, but you don't see anything. However, you stepped in something. It sounds gooey and disgusting and smells awful. And then my fighter turns to me and immediately says, That's okay. I know what it is. So they make their way through the mirrors in such a fashion that they're the correct sex when they reach the end. They walk through the door, the cannon fires, they move out of the way, except for the fighter who couldn't make the dex save, because fighter's dex isn't that great. So they get, like, the side of their stomach, like, gets nailed with a cannonball as it soars past, breaks a bunch of the mirrors, and specters start following them into this new room. So they're like, oh shit. So they barricade the door. They get into this next room, which is a kitchen, and they just hold out there. And with some quick thinking from my Shadow Monk and a little bit of minor illusion, they manage to hide themselves so that the specters cannot find them. Okay, this next room is kind of incredibly complicated, and it's going to take me forever to record and explain this, so buckle up. They're at this point in the campaign, this is just a dungeon delve campaign, so there's sections of the dungeon. At this point, they're in the basement, so they're in the actual dungeon of the dungeon. So the room contains 4 chained up vampires spawn, and a structure in the middle that says, one of these creatures holds the key to your freedom, choose wisely. Meanwhile, the vampires spawn, one of them is hiding a key inside of them, so the players need to kill that vampire spawn, get the key, and they can continue on their merry way and everybody's fine. However, if they choose one of the wrong vampire spawn, then the other 3 get freed and start attacking them. My players at this point were level 4? No, they were level 5. And the vampire spawn have a challenge of 5, and there's 3 of them. So that would not have been good if they got free. They themselves do not want to get killed, but they also don't want the players to pick the one that has the key. Through lots of talking, it basically works like they have to interrogate these vampires to figure out which one of them holds the key, and you are leaving them little clues in between to see if they can figure out which one of them has it. If you want to be really sadistic, though, what I was going to do, I knew my druid had locate object, and they had used it in the campaign before, so I was like, okay. What I should do is have them wear breastplate. The one with the key will have breastplate that is lined with lead, so locate object actually won't work through it. The other 3 are just going to have regular breastplates, but they will also have keys inside of them. So in that instance, if the druid had used locate object, they would have found 3 keys in all the wrong vampire spawn, and none in the one that was correct. But I figured, well, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't figure. I went on Reddit and I was like, "Hey, help with this puzzle. It's really confusing. I'm trying to figure this out." And I was like, should I make this armor thing so my druid can't use locate object to just solve the puzzle immediately?" Somebody said no, and their reason behind it was very, very solid, and I completely agree with this. And I've tried to use this mentality going forward. They said you should reward the druid for thinking to use locate object and being able to solve the puzzle. So I was like, that makes sense. Even if my puzzle doesn't go exactly how I wanted it, if they're still thinking outside of the box and on their feet and they're paying attention and everything's well, then they should get rewarded for that. So if the druid uses locate object, that's fine. They'll solve the puzzle and everything will be done. So I was like, all right, that's the mentality going forward. I'm not doing the breastplate thing. They're just going to be there, and if the druid uses locate object, that's fine. So they walk in the room, and immediately they see the vampire spawn. Only one of my players can read the text that's on the structure in the middle because it's written in Infernal and he speaks Infernal. So now they know what to do, but they have to figure out which vampire spawn has the key. So one of them is like, "Do you have the key?" One's like, no, I don't. They do. They're basically just casting blame on everybody. At this point, one of my players says, "Okay, well, I don't know which one it is, so I'm just going to start fucking with them." So there's 2 male vampires and 2 female vampires. They're all vampire spawn. And he goes to the males and he just starts, like, fucking with them and messing with them and stuff, and be like, "You're stupid," and chained up and whatever. So then they're kind of in rags, so he just rips one of the male vampires' shirt off of them and then just throws it on their head. Just like, "Yeah, screw you, you can't see now." That's important. That actually comes into play. So here's some hints that I left them. None of the vampires they were accusing each other. They were saying, like, "They have the key. No, they have the key. Kill them. Kill that person. They have the key." Not a single one of them said the one that was actually holding the key. None of them blamed that guy. None of them. None of them had pointed him out. So it was one of the males in the corner. So there's 4 of them in all. I don't know if I said that already. There's 4 of them in all. The male in the corner has the key. None of them have said that it is him. So then they start interrogating one of the females that's chained up near the door that won't open because they don't have the key. So they have the bright idea to be like, okay, well, hold on, let's leave the room because I left the door open because there's no way to progress anyway. And there were a few doors back was closed, so they were just kind of stuck in these few rooms. So they go back one room and they're like, okay, here's the plan. So we're going to tell that vampire that we've been interrogating that we're going to kill, that our choice is this person being the wrong one. So then we're going to see what their reaction is like. And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, okay, that's cool. That's good. They'll learn things. So they go there, then they're like, okay, so we're going to kill this guy, like right behind you. Just this fucker over here. We're going to murder him. And she's like, yeah, no, that's fine. Just don't kill me. But I'm like, because she had already accused somebody else that wasn't that guy of having the key. She had accused the other female vampire, and they're talking about killing this male that's the wrong vampire. So she's like, that's fine, whatever. Just don't kill me. So then they're like, okay, that was not the response we expected to hear. I love my monk. I love my monk. So the monk in this campaign is amazing, and I love him. And he just shined in this puzzle. So what he does, he goes over to the other female vampire that nobody's been talking to, and he's like, hey, we're thinking of killing that lady. He's like, yeah, no, do that. She has the key, because she's casting blame on her. So she's like, yeah, no, do that. She has the key. So he's like, well, how about this? How about this? So he grabs he takes a dagger from the druid or somebody. He gets some sharp object. So he pricks his finger and he waves blood in front of her and he's like, okay, here you go. There you go. And the vampire's like, oh, blood. Yes, that's so good. Thank you. He's like, all right, if you tell me where the key is, you can get even more. And then he takes this dagger and he slits his arm and he's bleeding on his arm. And I'm like, all right, you're bleeding on your arm. This vampire is just staring at your arm like, oh God, that's a lot of blood. I want to drink that. So vampire is super tempted. And this is a really good strategy because it's like, oh God. So I'm like, okay, this vampire knows if she drinks this now, she can get this blood. However, if she can lie and tell them that it's one that it's not, then she knows that she can get everybody's blood. So I'm like, okay, so this is just a will save, or a wisdom save. Sorry, I'm used to 3-5. So this is just a wisdom save on the vampire's part. And if they can't make it, then they'll just tell the truth because they can't resist this blood that's in front of them. If they can make it, they'll lie to them. So that way they can get more blood later. I rolled the vampire's wisdom save, and I rolled an 18. And their wisdom was +2, so they got a 20 total. And I'm just like, yeah, they resist that. So she's like, it's that one. She didn't specify which one. She said, it's him over there. And here's the thing. There's 2 vampire males at this point, and one of them has their head covered in a cloth, so he can't see. All she said was, it's him over there. This vampire is like, don't listen to her, she's lying. He doesn't know which one that she picked, and one of my players pointed that out. And this was kind of my fault, because I forgot that he had that on him that he couldn't see. So he's like, don't listen to her, she's lying. Because I thought he could just see and see that she was gesturing to him. So then my player was like, but he can't see. So that means he was freaking out because he knows that it's him. And I'm like, oh wait, shit, I forgot he had the thing on him. And then I was like, well, no, yeah, he says, don't listen to her, she's lying. But I did it in a way that wasn't the same. So I was less aggressive with it, and I think that came across, and that was kind of not good, because then they were like, he doesn't sound super convincing, or so, I don't know. So the players are like, okay, we got him, this worked. And the monk is like, okay, here, drink up. So he holds out his arm that's covered in blood, and this vampire's just like, and he actually goes down. He was at such low HP that this vampire just knocked him out, and he falls down at 0. Luckily, the druid had a heal spell on hand, so they were just like, boop, brought him back for being unconscious. He didn't have to make that save, so he's back up. So they're really unsure, and they're like, maybe we can find something else. There's another pathway that we didn't check, so maybe we could go that way or something. And they're like trying to figure things out. The monk's like, okay, yeah, no, you guys do that. You guys do that. So earlier in this puzzle room, the fighter had gotten bored and just pushed over this big stone obelisk pedestal thing in the center of the room with the text on it, and it was in a bunch of rubble. So at this point, my monk is like, no, yeah, you guys go. You guys, we'll figure something out. Let's go. So they leave the room, and my monk's like, all right, I'm gonna close the door and then just start piling rubble next to the door. I'm like, all right, you've done it. You're trapped in this room. The druid immediately realizes that, turns around and is like, shit, I gotta get back in there. So I'm like, okay, so start making strength checks, druid. So they're taking forever. The monk has more than enough time to kill the vampire he thinks it is, and he does, and that vampire dies, and the other 3 get freed. So at that point, everybody's just like, fuck, we just set 3 vampires spawn free. So at this point, I'm like, this is a little kind of crazy. I'm gonna give the monk a fighting chance, because at this point, he hasn't really befriended the vampire spawn that he gave the blood to, but she is not disliking him. So the druid gets all the stone out just in time to see the monk kill the vampire. The other 3 get freed, and the druid's like, fuck this, and then runs the other way. The monk tries to join him, but the vampire get faster initiative than him. The vampire are on the monk, and then they knock him unconscious. The druid cannot see anything that's going on in this room, so it's basically up to me to figure out what happens to the monk. I could have killed him right there, but I was like, no, this is kind of nuts. So what it did was, all right, the female vampire, you see her running, carrying the monk in her arms, trying to get the monk away from the other vampire, looking at him like he's lunch. So the chaos ensues. They take down the other vampires, and they find the key by killing the one that had it. They actually used another trap to kill one of the vampires, so that helped them a lot. And then they killed the one that had the key. They got the key. Everything was fine. They were just really hurt. So this next room's a pretty big mindfuck. The way it works is the player walks into the room and looks to one side. There is a stone wall on one side of the room, but the other side of the room has a mirror. And in the mirror, they can see 4 other copies of themselves. It's kind of like when you put 2 mirrors against each other and you can just see forever in both of them. But it's only on one side of the room, so that shouldn't be happening. So then the player's confronted with I went with a wraith, but you can really use anything in this situation. The one on the end is fighting something. And then the player needs to roll initiative 5 times for each of their versions. What is actually going on here is these are other versions of the player in this dungeon in separate universes. And really, odds are 4 other universe versions of the player are going to be in this dungeon. You can really do however many you want, though. The number of copies of other universe versions of themselves that are there, and whatever monster you use, is completely up to you. What happens is the monster goes down the line. It could, you want to usually have one that's overpowered. Well, not overpowered, but like one that can provide a very serious threat to the player. So it can just move down the line and start killing the player. And the monster retains its health as it goes through these mirrors into these other dimensions. So eventually, with enough tries, the player is going to kill the monster, and then they'll just continue on like nothing ever happened. So what happens in my game is the druid is on their own little adventure, because I've split the party by this point. The druid walks into this room, sees the copies of themselves, and at the end there is a wraith, and it is fighting one of the mirror versions of the druid. So the druid tries to figure out what exactly is going on. They have each version of themselves attack the spot where the wraith is, thinking that the wraith exists in every version of these mirrors, I guess. So that doesn't work. So I gave my druid a little leeway. They were basically like, hey, do you care if I turn into a tree? It's just a giant sack of health, so I was just like, that's fine. Okay. They then have all the versions of them turn into trees. The version that is fighting the wraith, they have attacked the wraith. But the version after that one, that is not fighting the wraith, it's next to the mirror that's fighting the wraith, he just breaks the mirror. And then the one after that breaks their mirror. The one after that breaks their mirror. The one after that breaks their mirror. So at this point, he's broken all the mirrors. And that's another way I kind of figured that this could end, is just by breaking the mirrors. So I was like, well, what if they break the mirrors? And then there's the Wraith, dragon, whatever you choose, can't get to the other versions of themselves, so they're fine. However, the one that was still there fighting the Wraith, not so much. So I had the person leave the room. The door's open. They're like, fine. And I'm like, okay, you leave the room. And as you're walking out, you hear in the back of your mind screaming, very distant screaming. So all the versions of the druid across all the universes got a little bit more health at that moment, at the cost of one of their own. So those were some of my interesting, I think maybe, I don't know, you be the judge of that, Dungeons and Dragons puzzle rooms and trap things and stuff. And if you have any dungeon rooms, traps, puzzles, any of that stuff, share them in the comments below. Because I would love to hear them. I'm always looking for more ideas for dungeon rooms and stuff. It's honestly one of my favorite parts about making a campaign. Probably why I just wanted to do a Dungeon Delve campaign for one of my first ones. So as always, thank you everybody so much for watching this video. If you found it helpful, let me know. I'm always like, I hope you can take these ideas and use them in your campaign, if you liked any of them. If you liked the video, go ahead and give it a like, and if you dislike it, just dislike it. That's fine too. If you liked it a whole lot and you like the other D&D video I did, or any of the streams, go ahead and you can follow my Twitch channel, or you can subscribe to me here on YouTube. You'll know when I post videos on YouTube and when I go live on Twitch. But regardless of what you do or who you are, I hope you have a fantastic day.